The Lusaka Strangler, the Milton Sipalo story. In 1980, as Zambia was still finding its footing as a young, independent nation, the capital city of Lusaka became the hunting ground for one of Africa's most prolific serial killers. Between January and September of that year, a predator stalked the streets, targeting vulnerable women and girls with a methodical precision that would earn him a ghastly world record. Milton Mufungulwa Sipalo, known as the Lusaka Strangler, murdered 29 women and girls in just 8 months, averaging one victim per week. His reign of terror would paralyze a city, trigger the largest manhunt in Zambian history, and ultimately end in a dramatic suicide that left many questions unanswered. To understand the emergence of Milton Sipalo as a killer, we must first examine the Zambia of 1980. The country had gained independence from British colonial rule in 1964, and by 1980, it was still grappling with the challenges of nation-building. Lusaka, as the capital, served as a magnet for people from across the country seeking economic opportunities and better lives. The city's bus terminals and railway stations were constantly bustling with travelers, many of them young women traveling alone between cities for work, family visits, or economic opportunities. These transportation hubs, while vital to the city's function, also created perfect hunting grounds for a predator who understood how to exploit the vulnerability of strangers in a large city. The social fabric of Zambia in 1980 was characterized by traditional communal values that emphasized helping strangers and showing hospitality to travelers. This cultural norm of trust and assistance would prove tragically advantageous to a killer who used the appearance of helpfulness as his primary weapon. Milton Mufungulwa Sipalo was a corporal in the Zambian Defense Forces, stationed at the military barracks in Lusaka. His outward appearance was unremarkable, a short, brown-skinned man who spoke English and Nyanja with a distinctive Lozi accent. His military uniform and official status gave him an air of authority and trustworthiness that he would exploit to deadly effect. What the public didn't know was that behind Sipalo's military facade lay a deeply troubled mind. According to later psychiatric analysis, Sipalo suffered from schizophrenia, a condition that was poorly understood and inadequately treated in 1980s Zambia, which was further complicated by a history of alcohol abuse, which may have lowered his inhibitions and contributed to his violent behavior. Sipalo would position himself at bus terminals and railway stations, targeting women who spoke Lozi or appeared to be from the Lozi ethnic group. His victims were typically travelers from other towns or cities, women who were unfamiliar with Lusaka and therefore more likely to accept help from someone in uniform. The killing spree began during the Christmas holiday period of 1979 to 1980. On January 5, 1980, police received an anonymous phone call reporting that a dead body was lying in a field behind Lusaka Boys Primary School. When Inspector Gondwe and his team arrived at the scene, they found a crowd of schoolboys whose holiday football game had been horribly interrupted. The decomposing body was quickly identified as Grace Shambaloo, a 21-year-old woman. Although investigators could not immediately determine a cause of death, they suspected she had been killed elsewhere before being dumped in the field. Just 2 days later, on January 6th, Woodlands police received another anonymous call about a dead body near Chitakuko Road. This second victim was an unidentified woman of approximately the same age who had been raped and strangled to death. Unlike the first victim, investigators concluded she had been murdered in the same location where her body was found. Her belongings were scattered around the area. On January 12th, Florence Mwangelwa Mulima, aged 21, became the third victim. Sipalo raped and murdered her, leaving her corpse behind a National Institute of Public Administration office. 2 days later, on January 14th, the killer claimed his youngest victim, 10-year-old Priscilla Ndlovu, whose parents had sent her to buy groceries. Sipalo strangled her to death and left her body in a maize field between Olympic Park and Northmead. The systematic nature of these crimes became increasingly apparent with each discovery. Sipalo's method was consistent. He would lure victims from public areas, typically bus terminals and railway stations, and lead them to secluded locations where he would rape and strangle them. He then left the victims in open spaces where they were likely to be discovered quickly. One of the most disturbing aspects of Sipalo's methodology was his apparent need to taunt authorities by surrounding the victims' bodies with coins or bottles. Many of his victims had strange mucus or foam oozing from their noses, indicating he may have used chemicals during his attacks. By the end of January 1980, investigators realized the murders were connected, although they were initially unsure whether they were dealing with a lone perpetrator or a gang. The police quickly interrogated all known sex offenders and murderers in the area, but found no leads. What frustrated seasoned detective Mr. Senyinda was the failure to properly follow up on crucial witness testimony. A security guard at Premium House had reported seeing a woman walking with a soldier in uniform late at night, but this lead was not adequately pursued. The very same night, a body appeared in the vicinity, representing a critical missed opportunity in the early stages of the investigation. As more murders occurred, public concern mounted, and both the press and politicians put intense pressure on the police to capture the perpetrator. In response, authorities launched Operation Rosemary, a comprehensive campaign to protect women and apprehend the killer. Operation Rosemary included multiple strategies to combat the growing threat. Police advised women through newspaper advertisements and posters to be vigilant of strangers offering to escort them. Authorities implemented a dusk-to-dawn curfew, severely limiting the movement of people in Lusaka during nighttime hours. A substantial reward of 10,000 kwacha was offered to anyone providing information leading to the arrest of a suspect. This was a significant sum in 1980 Zambia, reflecting the desperation of authorities to solve the case. Police set up patrols around Lusaka, focusing particularly on areas where Sipalo was known to pick up victims. They also planted undercover female detectives who spoke Lozi at bus terminals, though Sipalo never approached these trained officers, suggesting he had an ability to identify authentic targets. After the initial failures, the police command took direct control and assembled a special investigation team composed of the best detectives and investigators from around the country. This represented the largest manhunt in Zambian history up to that point. What became clear to investigators was that all victims were women and girls who were Lozi or spoke the Lozi language. Many were travelers from other towns or cities, often identified by national registration cards left on their bodies. This pattern suggested the killer had a specific ethnic preference and was familiar with identifying Lozi speakers. The geographic distribution of the crimes painted a picture of a killer who was highly mobile and intimately familiar with Lusaka's layout. Bodies turned up from woodlands to Kamwala, Olympic Park to the railway station, suggesting deep local knowledge. The breakthrough came on the evening of July 16, 1980, when Sipalo made a critical mistake. A young woman en route to her parents in Makeni arrived at Kamwala bus terminus, where two soldiers, one in combat, one in green, approached her. After the second soldier left, the one in combat uniform offered to escort the woman to Makeni. Despite her declining the offer, the man picked up her basket containing her belongings, forcing her to follow him. After walking for some time, they reached a small path where the man introduced himself as Lieutenant Nyambe. He then asked her if she could identify him in civilian clothes, to which she replied that she could. Upon hearing this confirmation, the soldier pushed her to the ground and started choking her. She managed to kick her attacker off, but he then struck her with a spanner. In a chilling moment that revealed the scope of his crimes, he told her, "You are the only girl whom I have failed to kill. I have killed the rest, so you are the one who will cause me to be arrested." The attacker hit the woman again and fled the scene, but 3 nearby security guards heard her screams and rushed to help while blowing their whistles. They took her to a hotel, and she was later transferred to a police station for questioning before receiving medical treatment at a local hospital. Survivor Nora Soko and a detective who'd seen them earlier described the attacker as a short brown man in military uniform, fluent in English and Nyanja with a Lozi accent. This description provided investigators with their first concrete lead. From this testimony, investigators determined that the perpetrator was either an actual soldier or someone impersonating military personnel. This insight led them to focus their investigation on military personnel, and to begin confronting soldiers who were loitering at bus and railway stations. On September 7, 1980, Sipalo struck again, but this attack would ultimately lead to his downfall. Josephine Mukatasha left Chingola with her baby, taking a bus to Lusaka, where she befriended a woman bound for Patalk. After arriving in Lusaka, both women decided to spend the night at the bus terminal since there were no buses scheduled for their destinations until the next morning. Shortly after, they were approached by two soldiers who asked to see their national registration cards. The soldiers attempted to convince the women to spend the night with them at a guest house, but both women declined. However, one of the soldiers carried the Patalk woman's bags and walked away with them, forcing her to follow him. That woman was never seen again and is presumed to be another victim. Approximately 1 hour later, the other soldier persuaded Mukatasha by telling her that her traveling companion was sleeping safely in the guest house. After 30 minutes of walking, they arrived at a narrow path near Kamwala Secondary School, where the soldier strangled Mukatasha as she tended to her baby. She lost consciousness but woke up hours later to find her child crying beside her. Her national registration card had been removed from her suitcase and placed on her head, another example of Sipalo's taunting behavior. The woman's wristwatch and wedding ring had been stolen, but she and her baby were alive. She eventually found help by walking to a nearby house. Like the first survivor, Mukatasha described her attacker, confirming he was a soldier with Lozi features. Following this second attack, police were commanded to confront any soldier loitering at bus and railway stations. The net was closing around the Lusaka Strangler, though he didn't yet know it. On September 16, 1980, Mukatasha returned to Kamwala bus station with a detective and several plainclothes officers. The plan was to see if her attacker would return to his hunting ground. The trap worked perfectly. Sipalo approached Mukatasha and said, "I happen to have seen you somewhere." When she said she'd never met him and had just arrived from Chingola, Sipalo asked her to join him at a guest house to book a room. At that moment, Mukatasha noticed something that sealed Sipalo's fate. He was wearing her wristwatch, the same one that had been stolen from her during the attack. She immediately alerted the nearby police officers, who arrested Milton Mufungulwa Sipalo on the spot. The day after his arrest, police searched Sipalo's home at the military barracks and found a treasure trove of evidence. His residence was filled with items belonging to several of his victims, personal effects that he had kept as trophies from his crimes. When confronted, Sipalo lied, saying the items belonged to a woman he once loved but left after learning she'd had abdominal surgery. He said the woman had taken her child to the hospital but left her luggage behind, a story that investigators quickly recognized as fabrication. 3 witnesses, including both survivors Nora Soko and Josephine Mukatasha, identified Sipalo as the Strangler in police lineups. When told about these identifications, Sipalo made a chilling admission. "If they can pick me from the line of others, then I am the one who tried to kill them." That afternoon, Sipalo led police officers to various locations where he had murdered his victims, demonstrating intimate knowledge of the crime scenes. His cooperation seemed to indicate either a desire to confess or a recognition that denial was no longer possible. During interrogation, Sipalo claimed he had an accomplice, a lance corporal named Kenneth Kaluwe. However, when Kaluwe was arrested and questioned, he denied any involvement in the murders. Police found no evidence linking him to the crimes, and he was subsequently released. The investigation revealed that Sipalo had been operating as a lone wolf, using his military status and uniform to gain the trust of his victims. His knowledge of Lusaka's geography and his ability to identify Lozi-speaking women suggested careful planning and observation of potential targets. Milton Sipalo was ultimately connected to the murders of 29 women and girls, plus 1 unborn child, making his total victim count 30 deaths. Additionally, 2 women, Nora Soko and Josephine Mukatasha, had survived his attacks. His killing spree had lasted exactly 8 months, from January to September 1980. This grim tally earned Sipalo a macabre world record. He was the most active serial killer in history, murdering more victims in a shorter period than any serial killer before or since. The systematic nature of his crimes and the brevity of his killing period made him unique among documented serial killers worldwide. The victims ranged in age from 10-year-old Priscilla Ndlovu to women in their 30s. All were Lozi or Lozi-speaking, confirming the ethnic component of Sipalo's victim selection. Many were travelers or visitors to Lusaka, making them particularly vulnerable to his approach tactics. On September 18, 1980, while being transferred to an interrogation room in the Lusaka Central Police Station, Sipalo made a desperate escape attempt. He broke free from the officers escorting him and ran to the roof of the police headquarters, still wearing handcuffs. A crowd gathered below as police officers and fire brigade personnel attempted to talk him down from the roof. Despite their pleas and negotiation attempts, Sipalo stood at the edge of the building, perhaps realizing that he faced either execution or life imprisonment for his crimes. In a final act of control over his own destiny, Milton Sipalo jumped from the roof of the Lusaka Central Police Station, killing himself instantly in front of the assembled crowd. His suicide occurred exactly 3 days after his arrest, bringing his reign of terror to a dramatic and definitive end. Sipalo's suicide prevented a full trial and left many questions unanswered about his motivations and the full extent of his crimes. The investigation had revealed a killer who was methodical, geographically mobile, and psychologically complex. The role of mental illness in Sipalo's crimes became a subject of posthumous analysis. His reported schizophrenia, combined with alcohol abuse, created a psychological profile of a man whose grip on reality had become severely compromised. However, the systematic nature of his crimes suggested that he retained enough cognitive function to plan and execute complex attacks. The investigation also highlighted the vulnerability of women travelers in 1980s Zambia. The cultural expectation of helping strangers, combined with respect for military authority, had created perfect conditions for Sipalo to exploit. His victims' trust in his uniform and official status had been weaponized against them. The Lusaka Strangler case had a profound impact on Zambian society that extended far beyond the immediate victims and their families. The 8 months of terror fundamentally changed how people, particularly women, moved through urban spaces. The case exposed significant weaknesses in Zambia's law enforcement capabilities. Failure to act on witness testimony, delays in linking the crimes, and the eventual creation of a nationwide special investigation team underscored the need for better police training and procedures. For the Lozi community, the case was particularly traumatic, as they had been specifically targeted based on their ethnic and linguistic identity. This targeting raised uncomfortable questions about tribal tensions and prejudices that existed beneath Zambia's official policy of national unity. Operation Rosemary, despite its ultimate success, revealed the limitations of law enforcement in dealing with serial crimes. The need for specialized training in criminal psychology, improved coordination between different police units, and better protection protocols for vulnerable populations all became apparent. The case led to significant reforms in how Zambian police handled serial crimes and missing persons cases. The success of the Special Investigation Team model influenced future approaches to complex criminal investigations, emphasizing the importance of bringing together the best expertise from across the country. The role of survivor testimony in solving the case cannot be overstated. Both Nora Soko and Josephine Mukatasha showed extraordinary courage in helping police identify and capture their attacker. Their bravery not only led to Sipalo's arrest, but also prevented additional murders. Sipalo's claim about having an accomplice raised questions that were never fully resolved. While Lance Corporal Kenneth Kaluwe was cleared of involvement, the possibility that other soldiers or military personnel may have been aware of Sipalo's activities remained a concern for investigators. The military's response to having a serial killer in its ranks led to increased screening and monitoring of personnel, particularly those with access to civilian areas. The case highlighted the potential for military training and authority to be misused for criminal purposes. Some investigators wondered whether Sipalo's knowledge of victim disposal and crime scene management might have been enhanced by military training. His ability to evade detection for 8 months while committing weekly murders suggested skills that went beyond mere luck or chance. Modern criminal psychology offers insights into Sipalo's behavior that were not available to investigators in 1980. His systematic targeting of Lozi women suggests a specific psychological trigger or traumatic association that may have been rooted in his personal history. The ritualistic aspects of his crimes, the placement of coins and bottles around bodies, the positioning of identification cards, the foam found around victims' mouths, indicate a killer who was driven by more than simple sexual violence. These behaviors suggest deep psychological compulsions that went beyond opportunistic crime. Sipalo's ability to maintain a military career while committing serial murders demonstrates the compartmentalization often seen in organized killers. His colleagues and superiors apparently had no suspicion of his double life, indicating a high level of psychological sophistication. The case of Milton Sipalo holds unique significance in the history of serial crime in Africa. As the most prolific serial killer documented on the continent, his crimes challenged assumptions about where and how such systematic violence could occur. The rapid pace of his killing, 1 victim per week for 8 months, remains unmatched in documented criminal history. This intensity of violence compressed into such a brief period makes the Lusaka Strangler case a subject of ongoing study for criminologists worldwide. The case also demonstrated the importance of international knowledge sharing in criminal investigation. The techniques used to profile and capture Sipalo drew on methods developed in other countries, highlighting the global nature of serious crime. The families of Sipalo's 29 victims were left to grapple with losses that were both sudden and senseless. Many of the women had been breadwinners or were traveling for economic opportunities, meaning their deaths had devastating financial as well as emotional consequences for their families. The fact that many victims were identified through national registration cards left on their bodies provided some closure to families, but also raised disturbing questions about Sipalo's psychological need to ensure his victims were identified. This behavior suggested he wanted his crimes to be discovered and his victims to be mourned. For the families of unidentified victims, the pain was compounded by uncertainty. Some bodies were never conclusively identified, leaving families to wonder whether their missing daughters and sisters had fallen victim to the Lusaka Strangler or met some other fate. The Lusaka Strangler case occurred during a critical period in Zambia's development as an independent nation. The country was working to build institutions, establish law and order, and create a sense of national unity among diverse ethnic groups. Sipalo's targeting of Lozi women challenged the narrative of national unity and raised uncomfortable questions about whether ethnic prejudices could manifest in extreme violence. The case forced Zambians to confront the reality that traditional tribal identities remained significant even in the modern urban environment of Lusaka. The cultural norm of hospitality and assistance to strangers, which Sipalo had exploited so effectively, came under scrutiny. The case led to a more cautious approach to interactions with strangers, particularly in urban areas where traditional community oversight was less effective. The extensive media coverage of the Lusaka Strangler case marked one of the first times that Zambian journalism had covered a serial crime story with such intensity. Newspapers provided detailed coverage of the investigation, the victims, and the eventual capture of the killer. The public's reaction to the case was characterized by fear, anger, and ultimately relief when Sipalo was captured. The curfews and safety warnings had disrupted normal life in Lusaka, making the resolution of the case a matter of public urgency beyond just law enforcement concerns. The dramatic circumstances of Sipalo's suicide provided a definitive end to the story that satisfied the public's need for closure, even as it frustrated investigators who had hoped to gain more information about his crimes and motivations. The Lusaka Strangler case gained international attention from criminologists and law enforcement agencies studying serial crime patterns. The unique characteristics of Sipalo's crimes, the ethnic targeting, the military connection, the rapid pace of killing, made it a significant case study. International experts noted the effectiveness of the survivor-led identification that led to Sipalo's capture. The courage of Nora Soko and Josephine Mukatasha in cooperating with police became a model for how survivor testimony could be used to solve serial crimes. The case also highlighted the importance of understanding local cultural and ethnic dynamics in criminal investigations. Sipalo's ability to identify Lozi speakers and his targeting of this specific population demonstrated how killers could exploit ethnic markers in diverse societies. Modern forensic techniques that were unavailable in 1980 might have provided additional insights into Sipalo's crimes. DNA analysis, advanced toxicology testing, and psychological profiling could have revealed more about his methods and motivations. The mucus and foam found around victims' mouths suggested possible chemical involvement in the attacks, but 1980s forensic science lacked the capability to identify specific substances. Modern analysis might have revealed whether Sipalo used drugs or chemicals to incapacitate his victims. Contemporary criminal profiling techniques might also have identified Sipalo as a suspect earlier in the investigation. His military background, ethnic identity, and geographic mobility would have made him a person of interest under modern profiling standards. The legacy of the Lusaka Strangler case extends beyond its historical significance to its impact on crime prevention and victim protection in Zambia. The case led to improved training for police officers dealing with serial crimes and better protocols for protecting vulnerable populations. The success of Operation Rosemary in eventually capturing Sipalo demonstrated the importance of coordinated law enforcement response to serial crimes. The techniques developed during this investigation became part of standard police procedures for handling similar cases. The case also highlighted the crucial role of public cooperation in solving serial crimes. The anonymous tips that led to the discovery of early victims and the courage of survivors in identifying their attacker showed how civilian involvement could be essential to successful investigations. As we remember the case of Milton Sipalo, it is crucial to honor the memory of his 29 victims and the unborn child who died with them. These were women and girls who were simply trying to live their lives, travel for legitimate purposes, and contribute to their families and communities. Grace Shambilu, Florence Mufungulwa Mulima, Priscilla Ndlovu, Regina Munanga, and the 25 other named and unnamed victims deserve to be remembered not just as statistics in a criminal case, but as individuals whose lives were cut short by senseless violence. The survivors, Nora Soko and Josephine Mukatasha, demonstrated extraordinary courage not only in surviving their attacks, but in cooperating with police to ensure their attacker could not harm others. Their bravery saved lives and brought justice to the families of those who had died. Today, Lusaka is a bustling metropolis of over 2 million people, far removed from the city that was terrorized by the Lusaka Strangler in 1980. The bus terminals and railway stations where Sipalo hunted his victims continue to serve as vital transportation hubs, though with improved security and awareness. The case of Milton Mufungulwa Sipalo remains a stark reminder that evil can emerge from the most unexpected places and that the protection of vulnerable populations requires constant vigilance. His 8-month reign of terror taught Zambia important lessons about law enforcement, community protection, and the need to take reports of missing persons seriously. While Sipalo's suicide denied justice to his victims' families and left many questions unanswered, his case contributed to improvements in criminal investigation techniques that have helped prevent similar tragedies. The story of the Lusaka Strangler serves as both a historical record and a contemporary warning that monsters can emerge from any society, that the protection of women and vulnerable populations must be a priority, and that the price of safety is eternal vigilance. In remembering Milton Sipalo's crimes, we honor his victims and commit ourselves to ensuring that such predators can never again find such easy prey. For 8 months, Lusaka's streets became his hunting ground, and 29 women, a child, and an unborn life were lost to a darkness cloaked in authority. Their stories, once muffled by fear, deserve to be spoken, remembered, and never repeated. If this story disturbed you, educated you, or moved you to care, please like, share, and subscribe to Weird World Wonders. We bring to light the atrocities that history tried to bury, not to glorify evil, but to honor the voices it tried to silence. Until next time, stay aware, stay vigilant, and never forget, some monsters wear medals, not masks.